Hey there, Jeff Manchester, Manchester Music. Welcome. You've probably told yourself, I don't need another plugin, especially not another reverb plugin, especially not another plate reverb plugin. But here's the thing. Everyone needs a great sounding plate reverb, especially one that's affordable and just super functional and tweakable. There are a couple competitors out there. Reverb is a super saturated space after all. You have Perfect Plate, you have the UAD EMT 140 plate. There's actually a 140 plate in Nectar from Isotope. In comes Radiance, however, with a very cheap, very tweakable, frankly great sounding option. These guys, Wave Alchemy, came out with Glow. Watch my video review of that. I'm going to be putting Radiance up the same kind of test here, insofar as I'm going to have it up against the EMT 140 from UAD, in my view, the most faithful emulation of that piece of hardware. I'm also going to put it across a bunch of different sound sources and really put it through its paces, and at the end deliver my final verdict on what is amazing and a couple areas for improvement. Now, before we get started, as ever, I have a Patreon. Please go there and become a patron. That would help support the channel, keep things nice and independent. I also have an affiliate link in the description. Anything you buy, I get a kickback, whatever you want, and it keeps the channel nice and independent, and it would mean a lot to me if you went over there. Okay, so let's not waste any more time. I have a vocal, some drums, another vocal, and some other stuff here, through which I'm going to put Radiance, which looks like this. Very platey, right? The decay time, the little notches over there. And just like the super plate from Sound Toys, you have a number of models over here, input, output, and a drive to really drive delete reflections. You can access pre-delay, some smoothing to tamp down on the transients of the reverb tail, some ducking, low and air. You also have ensemble over here, which I think is an emulation of the Chorus D unit, and Flux, which also was on Glow, just to add some kind of wonkiness and pitchiness to the reverb tail. And you've got a mono summing feature, as well as a modern sounding little algorithm to add some pizzazz to the reverb tail. And you've got the dry wet over here, which you can keep locked with this little lock panel. And if I click into FX, I get a whole bunch more features here. A gate, some additional duck release controls. Duck release, I believe, is a hunting term. No, it's for the ducking control over here, which is a bit of a macro for it. I'll bring it to 42%. FX, where mount is at 42 in the release. The way that it comes up, how slowly it comes up, is controlled over here as well, with some nice visualization. Some characters, you can add some grittiness, keep it clean, or add some vintage vibes to the tail. We have some width controls here, which you can turn on and off, mono, left, right, some. We also have a really helpful EQ, which is available in mid-side as well as stereo. So it's very, very comprehensive and tweakable. And the other thing that I really like that wasn't in Glow, I don't believe, is this tagging system for the presets. I can type in drums and then just get all the drum presets. If I go back a couple, drum air, mean gated drums, distorted, click on that, get all the distorted stuff, long, all the long stuff. Let's see if I can just go clean. Clean doesn't give me anything, but I get clear. Let's try big. That doesn't give me anything. Let's try one more. Nasty. That doesn't give me anything. Anyway, the tags are over here, and you can, of course, just press a heart, and then it'll save. And you can go back to your initial one over here, some lightning in the background, thunder, I should say. Hopefully you don't hear too much of that after this video is RX'd. So that is the UI in a nutshell. Let's actually just play a little bit of the tool through a vocal and see how it sounds.
All I want is to love you like there's nothing else on my mind. All I want is to hold you like there's nothing else I need besides a simple life.
Sounds very platey. Let's go over some of these controls here with the audio playing. Let me increase the input and the drive.
All I want is to love you like there's nothing else on my mind.
So you can see we can get pretty creative right away with just the two parameters at the front and of this unit. Control click or double click and brings things back to default.
All I want,
Increase the decay time either by dragging this around, or we can go old school, hit the plus or minus buttons.
all I want is to love you like there's nothing else
Make it much smaller and tighter.
on my mind. All I want is to hold you like there's nothing else I need besides a simple life. A simple life.
Now let's also check out the different models here. We have Air, Classic, Clear, Crisp, Dark, Tube, and finally on 7, Vintage. Now these are all EMT 140s, but they're EMT 140s in various states of, I don't know, various states of being. The team told me that these aren't, different kind of plates like a 240 and all that stuff. They're all 140s, but they've been through some modifications and whatnot. The Classic is, I think, the one that's closest to the one that we're all familiar and used to with our ears. But let's do a little round out. I'm going to bring things all the way to max. Keep our pre-delay down. We're going to get nice and washed and do a little preview of the different models here, starting with Air.
All I want is to love you like there's nothing else on my mind.
Classic.
All I want is to love you like there's nothing else on my mind.
Clear.
All I want is to love you like there's nothing else on my mind.
Like that a lot. Crisp.
All I want is to love you like there's nothing else on my mind.
Dark.
All I want is to love you like there's nothing else on my mind.
Definitely honkier, more cavernous. Tube.
All I want is to love you like there's nothing else on my mind.
Nice and saturated, honky. And Vintage. Ooh, eat your heart out, Valhalla.
All I want is to love you like there's nothing else on my mind.
There we go. That's the tour. So quite a few little models here, right? I think more than you get than the Super Plate from Sound Toys. Though if I'm being fair, with the Sound Toys one, you get multiple different kinds of plate reverbs. These are all, however, in Radiance, all 140s in various states of modification. Now, pre-delay, we know what that is, right? It delays the tool in terms of time as to when the reverb fires after the dry signal kind of passes through it. A little bit can be great for intelligibility. And just as in Glow, you have this little note value here, which signifies that we are synced and linked to the host tempo. And I asked them to add that feature for the last plugin, Glow, and they brought it in, which is amazing, and it's awesome here as well. Some low, some air, some smoothing. We talked about this. This just tamps down on transients and any kind of strident stuff that's happening in the reverb tail. Ducking, which is super helpful if you want increased separation. And pre-delay isn't enough for you. And ensemble, which is nice because this gives a kind of chorusing effect. And you also have flux, which adds some chaos, I think, to the reverb tail, which is really cool. Let me bring this all the way up with flux and listen to how we have some pitchiness happening in the tail and other kind of wonky stuff.
All I want is to love you like there's nothing else on my mind. All I want.
And let's try ensemble for some chorusing.
All I want is to love you like there's nothing else on my mind. All I want is to hold you like
Let's take it back.
there's nothing else I need besides a simple life.
One thing that I would love, and we're gonna get to this when I do my kind of final thing, is like just some buttons so we can bypass and unbypass. So if I'm bringing this all the way up and the effect is kind of minimal, like let's say if I bring it up to 12 o'clock, just be really great to just do an on-off for ensemble so I can hear what's happening without having to go all the way over here. We hear the plugin kind of calibrating and going back to like its default state. So just something that doesn't exist on a lot of plugins and is just more and more scarce. But I would love to see it here for when you're auditioning stuff to see what sounds really good, especially when the details are very minimal and you want to kind of be snotty about it and snooty about it. So then we have some controls here, mono, some things to mono, left, right, and we also have this modern control which gives a little bit of tightness in the low end to the tail and gives, you know, the bloom of the reverb a bit more of a modern edge as opposed to having it unbypassed, which is a very faithful emulation of the original units and how they treated the reverb. So let's now go to effects, and for this I think I'll make this pretty quick. We all know what a gate does, gated reverb, the Phil Collins thing. We have a duck in release, which is super helpful. So let's say we wanted some separation between the vocal and the reverb tail. So every time the vocal starts to do its thing, or any whatever the source is for that matter, we get a tamping down of the reverb. And then when the vocal stops or the dry signal stops, the reverb gets to bloom and come back up, almost like a sidechain, which is kind of cool. So let's dial something in.
All I want is to love you like there's nothing else on my mind. All I want is to hold you like there's nothing else I need besides a simple life.
So that's very obvious. I just want you to be able to hear it. So when the vocal is happening, reverb gets out of the way, and then by how much it comes up is up to you with the release control over here. Ideally, you want to go somewhere in between like a 50-50 for both of these so that you don't get this really swift kind of like rising back up, almost like you've added like some kind of gate to things or sidechain compressed it. But you also don't want to be going too hard on the amount so that, you know, the vocal's there and then it's just crystal clear and then the reverb comes up in the background and it sounds kind of unnatural. So playing with these two amounts, I think, gets you to something where you have some intelligibility, but you also have the reverb tail too.
All I want is to love you like there's nothing else on my mind. All I want is to hold you like there's nothing else I need besides a simple life.
And this would be great for me to be able to, like, I wish I had that button for the on-off to be like, okay, well, how does it sound with ducking and without? How do I know if I'm going too far? And again, it's just not really available. I have to hit Option, which brings it back to its 0, and then I have to remember wherever it was that I had it before. I could use the compare function in Logic, but not everyone has this built into their wrapper in their DAW, so just a little nitpicky thing. So we also have some width, so we can really make the bloom kind of panoramic at a high or low frequency level. The character is really cool, so I can add some grittiness. I'm going to bring the ducking down over here. Let's have a listen to the tail with some grit added to it.
All I want is to love you like there's nothing else on my mind.
Sounds pretty gritty, pretty tinny and distorted. Here's vintage.
All I want is to love you like there's nothing else on my mind. All I want is to hold you like there's nothing.
Back to clean.
All I want is to love you like.
Sounds clean. Now the EQ is really simple but very effective. We can bring the highs and lows in here, roll off some of the low end, roll off some of the high end of the reverb, protect some of the dry signal from reverberation, as well as some nice little bells right here in the mid range. And this is usually what you're looking at when I am EQing my reverb. I love when you have a nice parametric equalizer in here. Absolutely offense to Valhalla. They don't have this. They have like one knob. I need more control than that. I'm going to reach for something else if I don't see it. So I love that it's here. And again, mid-side, I think mid-side's a little overhyped personally. It was very 2 years ago where everyone had mid-side options. I personally think that like little bit of control here at the stereo level is kind of all you need for reverb, but the option is there. That's what people want. I'm happy it's there. This is nice because we have a little toggle button, so I can toggle my EQ on and off. Can you please, Wave Alchemy, add a little toggle switch under all of these Duck Ensemble Smooth? That would be just wonderful. But anyway, I'm not doing feature requests in a review video.
All I want is to love you like there's nothing else on my mind. All I want is to hold you like there's nothing else.
So without reverb.
All I want is to love you like there's nothing else on my mind.
Let's bring it in.
All I want is to hold you like there's nothing else I need beside.
So with the right amount of EQ, you almost don't need ducking because you have a little bit of onboard control of the reverb tail, which I really love. So let's go into a couple of other examples here. I wanted to bring in some drums, which are really great for when you want to add some gated or have some kind of exploding snare or whatever elements with the help of a reverb. So in this case, I have some drums here, which sound like this dry. You will have to adjust your headsets there. Sorry about that. It's a little louder than the other example. And if I bring in Radiance, we have this mean gated drums. The modern thing is on. We have a little bit of ensemble there. We also have the drive up, so we're nice and gritty. And we have the vintage and some rolled off lows and some gating, of course. And here's what it sounds like on. It's getting a little hot. I'm going to bring the output down a bit. So we get those transients just exploding a little bit, which reminds me of that exploding snare trick that you would set up with a reverb. In this case, it's all set up for you. After, before. Let's keep going. I wanted to show you some really wonky effects this time on Kara's vocal here. So in Radiance, we can go over here and we can pick a preset. In this case, I chose Spicy Vocal Chop. Hopefully this one isn't too loud either, but it just goes to show you what this tool is capable of. Not just vanilla plate reverb sounds, but also something kind of quirky and wild. Before?
I'm losing myself, I'm losing myself tonight.
After.
I'm losing myself, I'm losing myself tonight. Losing myself, I'm losing myself tonight.
So we have gritty character. We also have some gating going on, which just kind of makes that vocal really pop. We're also rolling some stuff off here on the low end. So this just can add a really otherworldly kind of vibe to whatever it is that you're working on. And I just typed in, I think, vocal. Anyway, to close out this video, I want to compare in a very, as apples to apples as I can get, Radiance against the EMT 140, which is the more expensive, officially sanctioned, EMT model tool here. So let's do a little before and after. I'm going to recalibrate, go to bus 5, which I believe is my Shootout bus. Yep, for Radiance. So once I've calibrated everything in Logic, we're going to do our shootout between the EMT from UA and Radiance from Wave Alchemy. Okay, so really quickly, I'm just going to show you what I have set up here. So for the EMT, you get 3 plate selections. It's not very clear in the documentation what the difference is sonically, at least in writing, between all these plates. But I found that the standard classic plate algorithm from Radiance best matched sonically plate letter B here. Input filters off, so we're not rolling anything off on the way in. Everything's getting included. I'm at the same decay value here of 4, and I do have width on all the way up, but width is also on the Radiance tool. And there's no EQ, no nothing. We're 100% wet, just so you can kind of see my math and check my work before I do this all-important comparison, which YouTube will tell me most of you are still here for, even though most of you aren't. But for those who are, you get the little treat of watching the shootout. So you can see here that I have width all the way up here. And I also chose a vintage character. I found that was the best comparison to make it sound like the EMT 140, which I guess for our purposes is like the original or whatever. So vintage is on. There's no EQ, just as there's no EQ in the EMT 140. And drive, everything is set to kind of midnight. We're on the classic setting here, mix all the way at the top. And with that, just so you know, every time I go over here to lead vocal Radiance, that's Radiance. And when I hit solo over here at the EMT 140, I'm playing the EMT 140. So now that you guys know what I'm doing, I'll put these guys side by side. You can see this brushed metal here from Radiance, not quite the same hue as the one from UA, but I can also change, I believe, the different colors here. If I go back here, we have a nice black one. And if I go back, we have the nice pearl one. Let's stick with pearl and let's commence, starting with Radiance. Here goes the shootout.
All I want is to love you like there's nothing else on my mind. All I want is to hold you like there's nothing else I need besides a simple life. A simple life. A simple life. A simple life.
Starting
All
over.
I want is to love you like there's nothing else on my mind. All I want is to hold you like there's nothing else I need besides a simple life. A simple life. A simple life.
Okay, so in my ears, in these cans, I find that the UAD EMT 140 definitely represents the low mids a little more in that tail. Things sound a little darker and more enveloped and lush. At the kind of default state here with Radiance, I find that we don't get the low mid attention that we do out of the EMT 140. We get something a little bit cleaner and a little bit more articulate and kind of tight. I think one of the challenges in trying to decide which two I like or which one I like better is that, you know, when you capture a plate sound, it's going to be that plate's sound. Just like when you capture a U87 or something like that, it's that U87. They don't all sound perfectly identical. There's going to be variation in terms of the components and the temperature and all that stuff. So it's really tough to get a one-to-one match unless they're all manufactured with kind of modern standards, which the plates from EMT certainly were not. And again, the rooms, the conditions, the components, all that stuff plays a factor in, you know, doing an apple to apple kind of shootout like this. So I just want to get that off, you know, my chest and get that out there. I do think that they sound very similar, and you might disagree with that, but to me, they do sound a little bit similar enough that you might go, okay, well, I can save a bit of money and go for Radiance, or, oh, I really want to save up and go for the EMT 140. At the end of the day, the people listening to the mix are not going to know. So really it's about what you like to use, what sounds good to you, and where you think the value is. One of my main complaints about the Radiance tool, and this is kind of indicative of a lot of other companies that go after the skeuomorphic old school thing, is that there really aren't a lot of buttons to make sure you can kind of bypass and preview what it is these little presets, these little knobs are doing. So I would love a bypass on bypass for all of these buttons, so I don't have to kind of double click or option click to go back to the default and then, you know, or use the compare feature or whatever. I would also just love a bypass button on the actual tool. A lot of plugin companies are now going for no bypass button to kind of save on real estate, so that you have to go down here to the insert level to turn this little power button on and off, which works, but can sometimes introduce some pops and clicks. And again, the whole thing kind of turns on again and comes to life and reanimates and there might be some kind of weirdness happening in the circuitry. So a bypass button would just be wonderful on board the actual unit itself, and some individual bypass buttons for all of these little kind of cool things like you have in the EQ. I think that would make this plugin just wonderful. So if you're still here, congratulations. What are your thoughts on this thing? Glow, Radiance, I'm sure there's more coming from Wave Alchemy, and I'd like to know what you think they should emulate and what you think of their emulation work here with Radiance, the EMT-140 emulation. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully this was valuable and educational and worth it. And as always, leave a comment. I'll read them all. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.